like all people that in this area of life that go off and research things, as an amateur physicist, as somebody that took off to explore things, I put practical I take something from paper and chalkboard and put in and build in the real sense. You'd be surprised how many, the show The Big Bang Theory is based in so much fiction. It's just complete nonsense. There are so many vast numbers of physicists, quantum researchers out there that live out their lives with grant money and research money based on one thing. They go out and they write a paper, a thesis, and they put it out there in the public. And they get paid for just writing papers. I'd say an 85% of all of them that I've ever looked into and read about and researched their field and their study and what they do never build anything. So the Big Bang Theory is a lot of fiction. It's like a room full of scientists that all know each other, and they all run off to a lab and they all build stuff. The only reality in the Big Bang Theory would be that they all have chalkboards, and in their homes there's a lot of chalkboards with a lot of equations and formulas sitting on them. Then their grant money and research money is based on what they come up with on those chalkboards. There's 15% of all quantum mechanics, all physicists out there who will actually build anything. When the Large Hadron Collider was built over in Europe, it was built by engineers from companies, given blueprints by these people that came up with the equations. Very few, maybe 1% of all of the engineers that built this thing were actual physicists. There's something to think about. The Large Hadron Collider, the largest physics experiment in human history. This massive 26-mile, 30-mile ring sitting over there, super collider, was constructed by ordinary guys who weld, have backgrounds in electronics, concrete building, cement construction. It wasn't built by physicists. So there's a vast shortage of physicists actually going out of their way to build anything. So the Big Bang Theory is very misleading. And it leads a lot of people to think that, well, maybe that's what they do. You go get a degree in this area of life, 4 years or 8 years of PhD, and you go out and you build stuff. A lot of them don't. Many don't. Many do experiments on a fundamentally smaller level, but it's not anything. You might be in a lab with a team of people working on a project about something. It's not always you. I'm one of those garage experimenters, amateurs running on his own, independent. And I took off in early 2013. There was some work from an unnamed NASA scientist, I won't say, who had, his work was derivative from Nikola Tesla's research in quantum mechanics 100 years earlier. Nikola Tesla was involved in this area of life. I mean, this is when Albert Einstein was around and the others. Einstein was coming up with the equations, and he wasn't building anything at the time. And Tesla was one of those guys that said, I'm gonna go build it. I'm gonna put it together, and I'm gonna build it. And what ends up happening is we have the birth of radio. We have the birth of the first wireless telegraphs. We also have a very curious investigation from Tesla in the world of that area of quantum mechanics, of electricity and light and things like this. And then we go into the area of another unnamed scientist that his work is published out there. It's out there. He builds stuff and he even sells them And he claims that they help your health and vitality and increase your psychic senses. Well, I got very curious about his claims, and I began to think, what in the hell is he on about? And I looked at his work, and I noticed I was intrigued by the fact that, yes, it looked like a viable electronics, like this was something that was actually working. And he sells his devices as amulets to wear around your neck for like $400 or $500. And he claims they increase your psychic power. And they make you, you know, help you with your life, you know, things like this. Well, as an experiencer and researcher in the world of entities and non-human intelligence entities and interdimensional research in that area of life, I didn't go looking for this. I had memories come back in 2010, and then I found myself running after this thing, trying to figure out what it is, why. I knew these events happened, and I wanted to understand what this very unusual and special girl from that time in my life was trying to tell me. And I thought, is there a way to increase a person's... I took off as an inventor, researcher, and amateur physicist. I took off with a very curious investigation into the world of how to increase one's own so-called psychic potential. How to, you know, and I got into the use of spirit boxes and PSP-7 spirit boxes because they work. I bought one. Spent a lot of money. It was like 75 in American dollars. It was like 60 something pounds, $75. And I ran this thing. I used it, and I had tremendous success. There were people coming through that I had known in my life that had died, and here they were. I was getting answers to questions about things I'd always wondered about. You know, there was a girl from way back in my past that died when she was 15, and she was coming through that damn thing. Now, that doesn't mean to say that she couldn't have reincarnated somewhere else. It's a weird kind of multi-dimensional thing about the soul and the different aspects. There could be some memory of her that still resonates about, and it was really weird. It was like everything was like there. What happened? There were other people that came through, and of course, but I went off to use these devices, not to talk to dead people, but try to understand that I was trying to communicate with and talk to the beings in higher dimensions. And this is pretty deep stuff. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I respect that. So, you know, turn the video off. If you don't want to hear this stuff, that's fine. It's not everybody's thing. But curiosity drove me further. And Dr. John Mack was a psychiatrist that was actually the grandfather of the whole idea of using radios and devices to communicate. And he started the whole concept of interdimensional communication. I didn't start that. He did. I'm just some latent guy coming along down the line in England, an American sitting in England saying, well, let's continue with that. Anyhow, I don't have a PhD. No one's going to come shoot me in the head. I wasn't really being paid attention to anyway, so I had all the anonymity to protect me. I can do this research, and nobody's going to think anything of it, you know, no matter what I come up with. And in some ways, I was being a bit selfish, because I thought, well, I can do this. I can get evidence all I want. Whether I share it or not is whatever. Fact is, I'm getting all this information and all this evidence, and I can do this, and I can do that. I can get away with it. Whether they know I'm doing it or not, they're not threatened by me. So I says, well, here's the deal. I looked at these devices this gentleman was selling, and they were crystal radios. But they don't have it was a crystal radio without an output, no earpiece. You didn't listen to the music with it. There's no tuner on it. And the most important thing, they were groundless. Which, if you know anything about electronics, they weren't grounded. There was no grounding. They weren't grounded. A grounded circuit and an ungrounded circuit is lots of physics will talk about what that means. In theory, these devices are, now they run all the time, there's no on-off switch. They are forever tuning frequencies infinitely. And because they're groundless, they can tune to infinity. Well, infinity seems to be a bit of a lazy term in physics. It seems to be something that physicists say when they don't know what goes beyond. And quite accidentally, and through observation alone, when I built my own variations of these things, I learned everything I could about them. I read everything I get my hands on about these components, the physics behind it. Whether I had a hard time getting that math or not, I learned it. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to know what this was about. So I went through calculus, trigonometry. I went through everything to do with advanced algebra. I went through everything I could to understand completely and totally the workings of what is going on with these circuits. And I built my own variations that were very large, using higher powered components, following the basic rules that they had to be groundless. And quite by accident in 2013, purely by accident 8 years ago, I discovered something. Some people try to find by purpose. I found by accident. And the extraordinary, it's like something out of pure science fiction. It's something that should not have happened, according to mainstream physicists. They would argue that this shouldn't have happened, but it happened. And one night, while tinkering with one of these damn things, I blipped out of 4 minutes of time. And it was a white flash in my eyes. I had an old computer monitor in front of me where it had the cathode ray tube. Not the flat screen, but the big old computer monitors back then. Now, it really means a lot when a computer monitor of those days gets fuzzy and hazy. It went psh, and there were lines over it, like some kind of wave of energy. I then heard the TV set. The movie that was on was Flight of the Navigator, the Disney movie. And it was in that scene where Sarah Jessica Parker was talking to the actor at NASA or whatever. All of a sudden I heard that scene repeated from 4 minutes before. And I thought there was something wrong with the TV set, because apparently it just repeated the last 4 minutes. And I got up from my chair. I had my mobile phone with me in my pocket. It was in my pocket, and I've been playing with this thing. Immediately I noticed that the clock on the wall was just an ordinary clock with a battery with hands on it. It wasn't digital. The clock on the TV set, because I had that was a flat screen TV with internet, and it had the clock on it, the digital clock, was 4 minutes off from my watch and my mobile phone. And I looked on the computer monitor, it too was 4 minutes off. I still remember that the shock of looking again and again at the time on the monitor and on the clock wall and at the TV set, and continuously going back and doing this and thinking, no, this isn't right. My son, back in the old house I was in, there was this front room, there was a door that went into the kitchen around the corner, because I was in a 3-bedroom property with a big old backyard. And he was in the kitchen. He stepped into the front room and looked at me, and he had a scared look on his face, and he says, "What the hell?" He said, "I just saw you go into the bathroom and shut the door, but as I walked in here, you're sitting here in front of the computer in the front room." And that just was like a 4-minute off issue going on. Then he went upstairs very quickly for whatever reason. I thought, well, I need the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom, and then as I got into the bathroom, I turned around and looked. My son was standing at the doorway now, looking at me, a bit scared, and he exited the room. And I thought, "What are you doing back downstairs?" I thought he went upstairs. Well, I came out of the bathroom, went back into the front room, and he said, "I've been upstairs the whole time. I left downstairs 10 minutes ago." So there was a flap or a blip in time. And I knew how this thing was built. I had the blueprints. I had all the schematics. I don't know how do you control something like that? Why did it do this? So I went into very deeply into this subject. And at first, I talk about alien contact and UFO research, and in those days, I began talking very openly on YouTube about anything. And then people said, "You're crazy, this guy's crazy, he's batshit crazy." Well, I then researched Project Pegasus, which is alleged to exist. It's a government secret program, allegedly. The American government, the intelligence community have time travel technology or some way of seeing the future or seeing the past. Whether they can physically go there or not is debatable, but one thing I did find, apparently they have the means to see the future. And it's not like a crystal ball or an astrologer. They have some actual machine that can see the future, which means America is pretty much invincible. They're going to do stuff that's not going to make any sense to you. Maybe they pulled out of Afghanistan and it's like, what the hell are you doing? Because they saw the future in the next few years if you stayed. I don't know. But ever since I learned in my uncovering things, Project Pegasus is a time travel or time surveillance project. So it's possible to see the past or manipulate space-time. So I looked into that. I found it could have been possible at that point when I began to notice the stuff I was putting online from memories of long ago in my youth began to conflict with something else I was putting online of another experience from the same time period. And I thought, now wait a minute, I'm not thinking about this thing fourth dimensionally. They are. They've already beaten me. I'm being laughed at. And why am I being laughed at? I've always told the truth. I'm not delusional, I'm not crazy. I'm always telling you the truth. I don't do drugs, I don't drink, I don't smoke pot. I'm going to be butt flat open. I don't smoke dope. I can pass any pee blood test any day of the week. I'm not on any kind of psychiatric medication. I'm not mentally ill. I've always told the truth. I've never, ever drank anything. I don't want to drink. Maybe long ago, I might have had a little bit of wine now and then, but I am not a drinker. I don't do this. And I thought something is definitely going on here. I'm only revealing to the public in 2013, 2014, 2015 every factual experience I can remember from my youth, ranging from this non-human female that I encountered to this lady from California that had visited me at 18 and 19 and 20, and she was claiming perhaps she was my lost mom. And then I began to think, wait a minute. She also claimed connections to the CIA. Deep connections. Now, wouldn't it be them, if they saw the future, they saw I was gaining ground in the UFO community, wouldn't it be just like them to put some poor woman up to this, to come out to this guy in Texas, giving this an extraordinary story so that he would talk about it in the future? How would they know that? Well, Project Pegasus, they could see me talking about it in the future. They could see me discussing UFO-related material and that girl. And how important is it to them to keep the UFO thing secret? It's a multi-trillion-dollar secret. They're not going to give a crap about anybody from California. They're not going to give a crap about her reputation or her image. They're going to care more about discrediting me than anything. And they'll go to any lengths to do this and put me up in front of anybody. They could have put me up in front of anyone and said, here, now go talk about that. And after learning that Project Pegasus was a real thing and that they are able to see the future, I thought that's what they might be doing to me. Whether or not this person is who she claimed to be or whatever she was saying, I'm not going to debate in this video. I'm not going to say that. I will say I'm going to say that's irrelevant. I'm going to say what's relevant is it classes as disinformation. It's disinformation. It's something that someone knew that's going to be repeated in the future. And that's going to make this guy look crazy. So, anyhow, how do we know this is true? Well, I know it's true. I would have probably even been skeptical of Project Pegasus had it not been for my own research in this area of life. In building these devices, I discovered myself that time can be manipulated very easily. And then I fell into the research of a Russian scientist. And again, unnamed, I won't say names. And he was postulating the theory that the fourth dimension has nothing to do with time at all. That's a popular misconception in Hollywood films, and it's a misconception, and it's probably disinformation being given to you, the public, from articles on science and books being put out. That the time travel, you have to go to the fourth dimension. It's nothing to do with the fourth dimension. Time, as he put it, is a component of the third dimension. It's wrapped up in our dimension, which means it's far more easier to manipulate than you could ever imagine. Time travel is so much more easier than they want you to know. That's a secret. I think they really don't want you to know that. And he had conducted similar experiments in Russia. Whether or not they were grandchild experiments based on Nikola Tesla's research, anybody can guess. But what he was building in Russia was rather interesting. It was like a giant version of what I built. And he claimed that people over there were slipping out of 3 or 4 hours of time. They could go an hour ahead, hour back. But he didn't have any way of controlling it either. So I built these things, and I just went mad on it. Hacked apart some old TV sets, the big TV sets, and I got a hold of components you can't get a hold of anymore, because we're now living in a more of a digital age. These electronic components are harder to come by, like the germanium crystals, radio diode crystals, which were used for communication back in the day in radios and old TVs, are now almost impossible to get a hold of. I bet you didn't know that. And not that it matters to everyday folks, but everything is now flat screen and computer and a mobile phone. You don't need those radio diodes. You've got satellite communication. You've got Bluetooth. You don't really need any of that. So I've got my hands on a lot of germanium crystals, a lot of diodes. Began building my own devices to an extent. I never really had anything as dramatic as that happen since that I know of. A lot of weird things have happened I never talked about. Well, for example, I don't want to say where or how, but I could go into experiences where one day there was a sidewalk in an area, the next day there was no sidewalk, and you could see that it never had been a sidewalk. So we're looking at parallel dimensions, alternate realities, slipping. I found wearing these devices seemed to somehow enhance performance, not in my own physical sense, but just being able to get to point A and point B, somehow it seemed a bit quicker. And being able to evade somebody. If I wanted to get away from someone, for example, I was running down the street or on a bike and they were in a car, well, we're going to get him, not a problem. Well, somehow or other, I found I could get away much faster. My son and I were out walking to the river one day, late 2013, and I was wearing one of those devices with me then. He was with me, so he was close to my vicinity, my space-time. And there were these guys dressed in black they were armed with rifles, with binoculars. They saw us, they went chasing us. They tried to get us. We went through a lot of fields, British fields, getting away from them. And there was a black van parked on the street down from us. So they were trying to kidnap us. And these guys were healthy. They were soldiers. They weren't British. They were men in black. And we evaded capture. And they probably still wonder how I got away from them, or we got away. Somehow we were able to continue to stay ahead of them, as if somehow our space-time was slightly warped out of a synchronization with their space-time. No matter how healthy they were, how fast they were running, we were still able to somehow or other move what seemed probably impossible to them. We could outpace them. They were trackers. These guys were dressed in combat gear. I'm quite sure they were experienced in tracking. We were able to evade capture. We went straight all the way out. We covered a large distance in a short space of time. And we were able to get back and never get captured by whoever they were. It's a true story. And so one of these, this is not a watch, I'm always wearing one of these things. I've always got it on me. It used to be a watch, it's been converted. I've got one of them in there with the crystals and all the whatnot. So it's quite an interesting idea, fun to play with. I can't prove this academically, that this is happening. How do you prove something like that on camera? I've wondered that one. Sometimes on Facebook blips happen. There's like days that seem to be a bit off. There's a post on Facebook that will be before a post that was posted that there the light just altered after waving that thing around. There it goes again. I mean, I've had posts on, I'll go back to that. I've had posts on Facebook, and there's a group I'm in that I point that out. It's impossible. I've got a post I've posted on Facebook that has a date and time that comes up after a post that was put before that one even existed. And I'll be saying something that I didn't know yet or shouldn't have posted yet. That shouldn't be there. So freaky things like this have happened, and I'm like, how can that be there? That shouldn't be there. So there's a lot of myriad of little things. I don't know where to go, and I say, well, it hasn't happened since then. I don't know. There's a lot of instances of space-time blips and warps, space warps, or time-space warps that seem to be going on. And there's some that are so minuscule, they could be off by a fraction of a tenth of a second. You wouldn't know. You just, oh, it's just Jason walking over there. Wait a minute, how did he go from that end to that end in 500 meters and get from one end of the park to the other in a matter of minutes without any kind of a buggy? That's not possible. That shouldn't be possible. You shouldn't be doing this. How'd you do that? Did you run? Well, no, you even if you ran, you couldn't have done it. So you think, well, who knows? It's a difficult thing to prove scientifically and document on the paper and on documentation when you're dealing with space-time issues. Physics this is a hard thing. It's more about observation. You'd have to have another physicist or a team of physicists watching and then observing and then noting. And based on their PhD levels and what they know, their reputation, well, then it would be down to what they say and what they saw. Let me do that again. One weird idea a guy told me about was a good idea, is to have a stopwatch and do a video like this and just have the stopwatch running. Stop the stopwatch at the end of the video. If the video is 30 minutes long that you're watching, but the stopwatch comes up showing 25 minutes, or say it says 35 minutes, how do you account for that? That would be weird. Anyhow, like I said, I've built versions of the devices I've built. I don't take credit for the complete their schematic design. I'm standing on the shoulder of geniuses, and I'm building bigger, larger versions of what they built. You know. You know, when you stand in this, it's like that movie Jurassic Park. Jeff Goldblum's character was right. He told them off. He sat there and told the creator of Jurassic Park, you stood on the shoulder of geniuses. You took what they did, and then you just you did your own thing. You took it further, and you don't take any responsibility for that, because it wasn't you didn't you didn't do that. It was something you copied and you replicated, and now you're going to put your name on the box. Well, I'm not going to slap my name on it. J.P. Moss, and try to sell this. I've taken it in areas that the professor that built his amulets didn't go. Now, in his videos on YouTube, he seemed to suggest that privately he built larger versions and had weird stuff happen. There is a video of this professor sitting in a room with noted physicists listening to him talk, and they look quite shocked and shaken. And he's sitting up in front of like 10 or 15 people in the audience, and he says to them, let's not say in the video what you saw. He's being very credible about himself. I'm not being very credible about here's what happened. He's being very calm and rational. He's not saying, and he said to them, don't repeat what you saw. They look shaken. They look pretty shaken, and they're like, oh. I will say that there's been a tremendous inspiration to me, and a man I will name. The only one that I can ever come across that really can explain what may be happening, and the only one that's ever really come up with any mathematics and equations and is working on a machine himself, is the great genius Professor Ronald Mallet from the University of Connecticut. And he's been a big inspiration to me. The man is today's I don't want to say he's today's Einstein. It's a bit like, why compare him to Einstein? He's his own genius beyond Einstein. And in fact, Einstein would be jealous of Professor Mallet. He'd be jealous of him. He's done more. Stephen Hawking's, God rest his soul, could do just so much from a wheelchair, no disrespect. But these great geniuses, you know, really it's about building the damn things. Build it, and they will come. If you build it, and they will come. He's building a machine. He wants to build a machine where you've got 10,000 lasers in a spiral, in a giant to create a vortex. There, the light shifting again from when I wave that thing around. It's causing some issue in the aberration of light. There it goes again. That's a noted effect. That's got nothing to do with me moving about. That's got something to do with when I'm waving that thing about. That's causing an aberration with light. Well, Professor Mallet said it very simply, if you control light, you control time. And he's often said and been interviewed, and people called in and asked, if I did this or that, if I built something, would it time travel, would it manipulate time? And he said yes. He's often said it's much easier to manipulate time than you think. And if you have a giant vortex of lasers running in a vortex, it will cause a warp in space-time inside the center of it. And he reckons that is a time machine. You could send messages into the past. It's a time machine. And he's a great, beautiful genius. I love this guy. And it's only Professor Mallet I've ever found that can ever really explain mathematically what has been happening with the things I built. My devices are crude, scaled-down versions of his laser time machine. I've already determined that. They're doing the same thing. They're manipulating light on a fundamental level. Light, not that we see, but you have to understand, light does control this dimension. It is what controls space-time. Light is the veil of our reality. The speed of light is not just that you can't break the speed of light. Think of it as the eggshell of our dimension. And if you go near the speed of light, like Einstein pointed out, time slows down. When you go home, an hour has passed for you, but 1,000 years has passed, or maybe 30 years has passed on Earth, and you haven't aged. That's a mathematical fact. And Professor Mallett's taken it much, much further on how to do this thing and go back in time. And his mathematics is sound. He's a genius. And it's only through Professor Mallett over the years I've ever found comfort and an answer to what may be happening with these devices I built. He's been the one. Without, I mean, I've had very limited contact with him, but he's the one. My devices are crystal radios on steroids, basically. And they're crystal radios that have no output. They're circuits that are groundless, and they act as sort of like a supercapacitor. It's like a crystal radio in a capacitor. And so it's modulating frequencies to infinity, which means, think of light, not in the light that we see, but light that we don't see. Radio is light. Radio fields is a form of light. It is light. Electromagnetic waves. This is light. Now, if you can manipulate that light in a circuit, you can draw it in and amplify it thousands of times a second. In theory, you're drawing in. You should be moving fast. You have particles now moving faster than light, or at least creating enough of a weight of quantum field within a space-time continuum that it's causing a warp on the gravity. That slight warping of gravity is a curvature that changes space-time. That curvature of space-time of that gravity, that warping of gravity, will move you in your vicinity out of the synchronization and time referencing, frame referencing from your space-time and the clocks around you. In a sense, it's like sitting still and moving near the speed of light, because the device is doing the work for you. And intriguingly, Professor Mallett, this wonderful, wonderful genius in his mathematics, has found, he's done it. He's done it better than me. He's got it. He's building something that will do the job way better. So my devices are a primitive, crude version of what he's going to build. And they do cause that warpage of gravity through the amplification of a huge volume of quantum particles within a space-time continuum, which then causes the warpage of gravity, and it changes the curvature of space-time within a local vicinity, thus changing my frame referencing, my time frame referencing from now to something out of synchronization with everybody else around me. That's a simple way of putting it. I could get more complicated than that and explain a little more than that. But that is, in principle, what's going on. So my devices are just amplifying light. Well, what do you mean, Jason? It's not giving off any light. Well, no, we're not talking about light that we see, visible light, though that is connected. It will be affecting everything, because the resonators, the germanium crystals, are affected by visible light and light we don't see. So all it's got to do is draw it in and cause a weight, and it's like a bowling ball and a trampoline. Think of space-time as the trampoline, and think of one of my devices as a heavy ball weighing down, and that ball, that heavy mass, is quantum particles, and it's weighing down on the trampoline. And the more it causes a curve on the trampoline, the less that area where that ball is going to be synchronized with the space-time and the clocks around the trampoline mass, along its surface. Now when you pull the ball away, it falls back into synchronization with the space-time on the surface of the trampoline around it. So in a sense, you're just basically doing space warps. Okay, so buy today, go to my website. Alright, that'll be $59.99. I'll take cash, COD. No, I'm teasing. If you buy now, you get 1, 2 for the price. No. Would you really want to sell all these to the public? No. So that's my video for Facebook and YouTube. You can catch me at Centennial on YouTube and Facebook, Jason P. Moss, author Jason P. Moss, or JP Moss. And I owe all this inspiration to getting down this pan, and what drew me into this, what pulled me down this direction, was memories of a 4'6" tall black-haired girl. There's likenesses of her on my wall, you know, paintings or a doll or whatever, from another area of life. Someone very special to me that inspired me to go down this area, to do the things I do. And we do have that contact and that communication, but I won't go on that in this video. But anyhow, there it is. Alien human hybrid people are very real. Thank you for watching.